I'm Mark Frost, and you're listening to Twin Peaks Unwrapped.
Just so everybody knows, this is spoiler territory. So don't,
Right.
if you haven't read the book or you want to read it, stop listening to us right now. I know the description of this podcast says spoilers.
And for non-spoilers, you're welcome to go back a few weeks to Mark Frost's interview. We didn't do any spoilers in that, and check that out.
Yeah, listen to that.
I've got idea man. You take me for a walk under the sycamore.
Welcome to Twin Peaks Unwrapped. I'm your host, Ben Durant.
And I'm Joel Bocko.
And beside me
Is Bryon Kazaska. Today's show is
The Secret History of Twin Peaks. So why are we waiting so long here? It's been 2 weeks. It's been out.
We've mentioned how we didn't want to get into this right away. We wanted people to read it, listen to it, consume it, talk about it, and then we felt comfortable to talk about it on the podcast.
Yeah. And we did get the books a little earlier, a few days earlier than...
Yeah, for me, it wasn't enough time to get it.
No, it wasn't enough time. I had to read the whole thing before the Mark Frost interview. I wanted to be able to consume it, so I kind of got a good sense of what the book was.
Yeah.
But even then, I read it, or my wife would read. my wife was the book on tape. We'd be driving, and my wife would be reading to me as we're going places, because we have a pretty busy life, but we're trying to make time to read the book.
People read to you.
Yes. So yeah, I consumed it all, but I definitely need to read it again, and I'm listening to it on Audible.
Yeah, I got about 100 pages in, and I went, oh, there's the Audible version. So I went to that.
Why are you taking up all your time reading when you can lead listening?
Yeah, well,
I hear you.
I figured since you're reading it, I was like, I'll go Audible. That way you have two different experiences.
Yeah.
The book has everything. The Audible version's cool for other reasons, but you're missing the pictures and the illustrations and it looks like a postcard and a letter. You don't see that.
Right. So tell me, what did you think of this book?
I liked it. I liked the audiobook. I like hearing Kyle MacLachlan. I like hearing some of the voices. They did use other actors.
Joel, we want to know, what do you think of the book?
I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was a lot of fun. I got a kick out of it. Some of the things that annoyed other people annoyed me. Some of the ones didn't so much. Overall, I mean, I had a lot of fun with it. It's kind of cool to be looking at Twin Peaks and studying it and talking about it and watching it so intensely, and then something new comes along. You know, I know you guys have talked about that too. It almost takes a little getting used to. It's like, at what point are we really realizing that Twin Peaks, and I mean, obviously this will be even more true after the new series starts, Twin Peaks is no longer what we've known it as for some of us 25 years.
Right. I mean, it's interesting how the structure of this book is told. We have an agent TP who is looking through dossier.
Yeah, files and everything.
Right. And so we have the archivist who is giving notes. We learn about Doug Milford. Yep. And he has, I think, been collecting stuff as well. So he's been collecting some of the stuff. And he says near the end of the book that he would sometimes purposely leave things for Major Briggs to find.
I think it's safe to say we know that Major Briggs is archivist. When we were at the Barnes & Noble book event, I think I knew who that is. And then Mark from Dear Meta Radio said, yeah, I have my theories. And then when we were listening to it, I went, yeah. And I turned to Mark and I said, my theory is this. And he goes, yeah, mine too. Yeah. And I was right.
And I just getting into the beginning of the book, I felt like, boy, the perfect person you'd want would be Major Briggs, because Major Briggs always had all the secrets. I mean, he was involved with stuff going on in the woods, and he had these military background. And
he would disappear all the time.
He'd disappear all the time. So he was part of like the mythology of Twin Peaks. It's like there wouldn't be a better person than to have. And he seems like somebody that was really into researching and getting the facts, and he seemed like the perfect person to be the archivist.
I totally agree. And also, you make a good point. He was the person that almost gave us the history of Twin Peaks on the show. Right through his eyes, we knew he would disappear in the woods. He was the one that came to Cooper with the piece of paper.
I have a message for you. From whom?
I'm not at liberty to reveal the nature of my work. This secrecy pains me from time to time. Any bureaucracy that functions in secret inevitably lends itself to corruption. But these rules I have pledged to uphold. I believe a pledge is sacred.
Speaking as a man and a fellow employee of the federal government, so do I.
Well, I may reveal this much. Among my many tasks is the maintenance of deep space monitors aimed at galaxies beyond our own. We routinely receive various communications, space garbage to decode and examine. They look something like this. It's radio waves and gibberish, Agent Cooper. Till Thursday night. Friday morning, to be exact.
Around the time that I was shot.
The readout took us by surprise. Row after row of gibberish, and all of a sudden, the owls are not what they seem.
Why did you bring this to me?
Because later in the morning, Cooper.
My God.
As far as the dossier stuff, I mean, I think we touched on this last time. Like, I think that's a brilliant move because it ties it in with all the other Twin Peaks media. And I know you guys brought that up to Frost himself. It's like, that's so very Twin Peaks. In terms of the structure of it, I like the format a lot. I enjoyed reading it. I found it to be a little bit slow going in terms of all the different styles and all the different notes and stuff. You know, I was amazed some people read it so quickly. I was like, I got to do some little doses each day, and then I ended up, you know, reading a lot on the weekend and finishing it about almost a week ago.
What's some of your favorite parts of the book?
I enjoyed the Lewis and Clark thing. Also, the stuff with Chief Joseph, when I got into that, which is almost more straight history. Some of it, I mean, some of it, obviously, you know, they fictionalized everything, but that stuff was really interesting to read. And then after that, probably some of the early things with Twin Peaks where they're talking about Andrew Packard and the woods and the Boy Scout and that stuff. That was just kind of fun because I think that was kind of our first glimpse into the Twin Peaks people that we knew. That was like our earliest one.
Yeah.
I liked the whole log lady and Carl Rod getting abducted, and you know, seeing Carl Rod in here was a lot of fun.
I was happy to see that Mark Frost did take stuff from Firewalk with Me. I mean, he brought in the owl ring at the beginning of the book.
Lewis and Clark.
Right, Lewis and Clark, it looks like...
But then, like, this ring seems to have gotten around.
The scene where Richard Nixon, wearing the ring that we see on a teenage prostitute from a trailer park in Firewalk with Me. Just want to point that out. He's wearing that ring about 15 years before Teresa Banks, so that's an interesting progression of events. So Richard Nixon wearing this Firewalk with Me ring with Jackie Gleason and Dougie Milford goes to see a little gray alien thing in an underground bunker. And I mean, to be clear, too, it was actually pretty creepy the way it was described, like the psychic attacks. I'm not saying it was pure comedy, but, I mean, that's Jackie Gleason's in there. Jackie Gleason is now officially part of the canon of Twin Peaks.
Yeah,
right.
But you're either going to hate that or you're going to love it. That's just so absurd.
The ring in this book was interesting, but for me, it did feel like the ring is like Forrest Gump, and he went through this. This ring has traveled through history. And
Are you saying you don't like Forrest Gump?
No, I love Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
But I don't know how I feel about the ring having this history.
Okay.
It was probably my least favorite part of the book.
I heard a few people make that comparison, actually, and I think I called it at one point, the ring is like the feather in Forrest Gump. This is definitely like a very historical Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And that's one of the number one differences from David Lynch's Twin Peaks. His exists kind of outside of history and the sort of timeless quality, and Mark Frost is all about contextualizing it in a larger history that's real. That's one of the biggest differences between them, and this book really highlights it.
Joel, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. Twin Peaks was its own world, and this book made it part of our world. They grounded Twin Peaks in a way, bringing in the historical figures and real history. It made Twin Peaks feel part of the world we live in.
Donald Trump is in it.
Yeah, which is weird, huh?
A lot of dates, Donald Trump, yeah.
Another Forrest Gump moment.
And you were saying, I think you mentioned Lewis from Lewis and Clark. I really did love that section, especially because I didn't know all the history. I didn't realize, well, there's controversy on whether it was a suicide or his family to this day still want to get the body and see if he might have been murdered and stuff. But it was interesting to have that background. And then it seems like it's tied in with the ring. He got the ring. He's holding on to the ring. Yeah. Did the ring make him crazy? Did the ring make him possessed? Or is people coming after him for the ring?
Yeah, that's true, too, when you put it that way. Even after reading this book, we still really don't know what the ring signifies or what it does, at all, really. It's kind of left to the new series to hopefully kind of, not explain, but clarify, maybe? I don't know if clarify is the word you want to use with Lynch, but...
Right, and it was interesting, the Native American also said to, I think, Lewis not to wear it. So it made me think about Cooper saying, don't wear the ring. I think the ring, to me, signifies that mystical element, the spirits and the evil in the woods, which we don't get that. We don't get Bob. We don't get the little man. We do get... There's many mentions of giants, which to me makes me think of the spiritual giant there that came to Cooper.
That's
for
what I
his
got
ring.
too. Yeah,
so, but we get only little bit of a feeling that there is the spirits in the woods, and so I feel like that ring is what ties us.
You mentioned the ring with Cooper. I wonder if that ring was brought into the series on Firewalk with Me. But what if that ring hadn't? What if that ring was with us the whole time? Because it's interesting the giant takes Cooper's ring. Mm-hmm. But it's not the ring. But what if it was the ring?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting question because I also think, why does Cooper have a ring on? He's not married.
Right.
He wasn't engaged.
Well, we learned about this. We learned that it was from the Cooper book. We learned that ring was his mother's ring. And she...
Oh, and she had the dreams, too.
She had the weird dreams. And so it's funny.
I totally forgot about that. Yeah,
and so
good point.
At least from the book, we learned that it was the mother's ring. And maybe there was something special about that ring. And then Mike the Spirit there talks about the idea of a ring, a circle between Bob and himself. And so clearly, I think David Lynch and Bob Angles used a lot of this material that was in Twin Peaks series and kind of brought it into the movie.
It's interesting that David Lynch did Firewalk with Me and you went and gave us Laura Palmer and went back, where Mark Frost said you wanted to go forward. Then this book comes out and Mark Frost doesn't go forward, goes backwards. Because it's the history. And he did this by himself. He had no influence from Lynch at all. He told us in an interview.
Yes.
It's like Mark Frost Unbound, kind of, the way David Lynch was with Firewalk with Me. Like, this book is basically Mark Frost's Firewalk with Me. It's funny because I listened to your interview, and I listened to Brad Duke's, and of course both of you, and a lot of people everywhere are asking about Firewalk with Me. I've heard it come up a lot. It came up in a sort of an AMA he did on IO9. It's a website. I tweeted a link to it. It comes up a lot. And, with you guys, he kind of had to answer it. With that one, he didn't have to, really, so he kind of avoided it. But it's interesting, the sense I'm getting, not to put words in his mouth, but it seems like he's come to, like, a peace with Firewalk with Me. But it definitely doesn't seem like it's really his jam. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And even the stuff he says about it, he kind of talks more about the missing pieces than Firewalk with Me. So I kind of get the sense that, like, what interested him about it was more the world-building stuff. So, like, the ring, Jeffries, and there is a strong sense, even more so than on the show, in the film, that the FBI is very enmeshed with supernatural, paranormal phenomenon. Because in the show, the FBI is stumbling across this information that the military has. Which is very X-Files,
Yeah.
But then basically, the Twin Peaks is what would happen if you had, like, Spooky Mulder, but instead of being locked away in a corner office, he actually had his own, division or whatever unit that Gordon Cole runs. Because he's basically, He's basically like that character, but like with a whole crew of agents with him. You know, I've been watching some of the early episodes of X-Files lately, and it's like they're very much butting up against the bureaucracy within their organization.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he sets up a world where, you know, the FBI is kind of open to this stuff and investigating it, even if other government agencies maybe are a little more.
Oregon female, age 21, no explainable cause of death. Autopsy shows nothing. Zip. There are, however, these 2 distinct marks on her lower back. Dr. Scully, can you ID these marks?
Needle punctures, maybe. An animal bite. Electrocution of some kind.
How's your chemistry? This is the substance found in the surrounding tissue.
It's organic. I don't know. Is it some kind of synthetic protein?
Beats me. I've never seen it before either. But here it is again in Sturgis, South Dakota. And again in Shamrock, Texas.
Do you have a theory?
I have plenty of theories. Maybe what you can explain to me is why it's bureau policy to label these cases as unexplained phenomena and ignore them. Do you believe in the existence of extraterrestrials?
Is this really the secret history of the X-Files?
Yeah.
There was like long passages of about like how there was these sightings. We should get into Doug Milford. I mean, Doug Milford is with the military, and he seems to be a man in black, and he seems to be covering up. First, it seems like he's covering up aliens. Alien sightings, but now you're wondering, is the government doing other things that they're trying to cover up? We saw this in the second season of Twin Peaks. There was Major Briggs appeared to be abducted with a white light.
But I always felt that in the show when he would go into the lodge. He was going somewhere else. Like, I didn't feel like he was being abducted.
Right.
But they would have the 3 things.
The tattoos.
The little markings, and the long lady had it.
And you noticed it today.
My log noticed. I remember.
What do you remember, Margaret?
Look at the back of my leg. I was 7 years old. I went walking up in the woods, and when I got back, I was told that I had disappeared for a day. All I could recall was a flash of light, and that mark was on my leg.
We all 3 recall the light.
And also the call of the owl.
Yes, I remember.
The only other time I saw that sight and heard that sound was right before my husband died in the fire.
Actually, just last night talked to John Thorne, and that interview probably won't be published for another month or 2, just because I've got so much stuff I'm working on right now that it's a little bit on the back burner. But I wanted to sort of share thoughts with him right after the book came out, even if it doesn't come out right away.
Yeah.
And he's gone on the Red Room podcast, and I don't know if he's talked to you guys since the book, but
I've talked to him a little bit.
Two sort of phenomena, if I can speak for him. One is he seems to be somewhat disappointed with the book. He said he would probably recommend it, and he goes back and forth, but overall, he was kind of saying, like, wow, when I first read this, I was kind of overcome with this feeling of, like, disappointment or whatever. Like, this just wasn't what he was necessarily looking for initially, although, he's come up with some ideas that make it. So that's the other thing, is the other phenomenon I noticed with him is he was very interested in the idea that Frost is sort of playing tricks with us. And he's not nearly alone in that, because I've seen a lot of people put those ideas forward. I've even, I think there's like 75 pages of comments on Doug. I'm sure a lot of them are from before the book came out, but a lot of them are from after. And it's people, I've heard people, okay, I've cracked the code, and they're going into like all these details about how we're being fooled about this element and that element. And so I haven't read most of that stuff yet. I just have to say, instinctively for me, I think I like the book less if it's some sort of forgery, trickery. It's just it's a little bit like a dead end. I mean, it would literally be a dead end. But even like created, it feels a little like a dead end to me.
Yeah.
I'd rather have just the contradictions be there and sort of have to live with them or work them out. If it just becomes like, no, everything canon is true, and the contradictions here are just this character was doing this for this reason to psych you out. I don't know, because a little too much of an intellectual puzzle. And obviously, I love to dig into Twin Peaks and analyze it, pick things apart, but never really been that interested in it as sort of like a parlor game. So that's not to say that everybody who's coming up with this series or embracing those ideas means it that way or takes it that way. That's just for me. If it ended up being that, and I could be surprised. They could do something interesting with that aspect. But it feels a little bit like okay, well, why make a whole book of forged documents about a fictional cell? That just doesn't do much for me.
Yeah, Joel, it's interesting. Like when I read the book, I think I felt like you. I kind of shrugged it off. Was like, okay, there's some inaccuracies, and I was talking with John Thorne, and he seemed to be seemed to be really
he's got some cool ideas. Don't get me wrong.
Oh
John does, but
at first he seemed really depressed by. At first he seemed like he was really down with how inaccurate it was, and I think with his theories now and where he's going, he feels better about the book.
Yeah.
So I started off with kind of like, okay, it is what it is, but lately, maybe I'm just getting hyped up by the community that I feel like, well, maybe it really is something happening here, and now I feel like I'm gonna go crazy because I started looking at it and I'm seeing things that are probably not there. But we had there was a Mark Frost reading in New York that Bryon and I went to, and I swear,
how was that?
That was awesome. We had a great time. We got to meet him, say hi to Mark, and it was really cool. And I swear he said at that reading, and Lana won the Miss Twin Peaks contest.
Yeah, he did, because I've heard multiple people confirm that.
And it's like, what? I mean, like...
Your ears did not deceive you.
And it's like, why would he say something like that? And just there's too many things. Like, in this story, there's Pete Martell. He describes Pete Martell as a checkers player, not a chess player. It's like, are you kidding?
Yeah, I did see that. I totally forgot that until you brought it up. Thank you for bringing that
and it's like, what? Are you kidding me? This is the champion chess player. He could beat two people at the same time. He helped Cooper over multiple episodes. He's helping Cooper beat Wyndham Earl, or at least get into a stalemate. Yeah. So it's like, these are episodes that Mark Frost wrote, or he's co-wrote, and it's like he knows what he's talking about.
Mark Frost, when we interviewed him, he said he doesn't like to use the word canon. And he doesn't what if this is just his way of telling the story? What if he's not playing with anybody and this is just his alternative history to Twin Peaks? I don't know.
It makes me think of Lost Highway, where it's like, I like to remember in my own way, or something like that. It's just like, that's the way.
Yeah, good point. Good comparison. That was out of my first impression. And then my next impression, my first impression was either he's changing it just because he feels like it, which it has to be the case, because there's no way he could, especially if you really rewatch the series, there's no way he would not remember like how Ed and Nadine met, you know?
Yeah. That's a big one.
That's the biggest one to me, I think, that stood out the most. Even Laura being 18, I mean, he could have just forgotten, but that was such a major point in the pilot of like, she's only 17 and 17 years old, and they say it over and over. It's like such an important number, probably because it keeps her just that side of adulthood. So for whatever reason it was, and then in the book, it's like, oh, she came to me when she was 18. There's like a whole rationale given for it, and it's like
Jacoby there,
yeah, exactly. My first impression was he's forgotten some things and just decided to change others. And then my second impression, when I started seeing you and John's tweets before I was done, and I was like, oh, I better read it fast. But
Sorry,
it wasn't giving anything away. But it was fine. It was more tantalizing than anything at that point. So I thought, okay, so maybe he's creating an alternate universe, because it seemed like that's what John. Now, the third idea that I sort of came to after all that was people talking about, no, they're intentional mistakes and contradictions that are going to show that these are forged documents. And that, like I said, that's probably the option that interests me the least. It feels like a cheat, kind of.
Yeah.
Feels a little bit of a cheat to just make it all put. I mean, also because how are you going to reveal that? This is a David Lynch directed show. I guarantee you he's not going to have characters sit down and spout expository dialogue about, on page 34 of the dossier, there was a character who said that, like, it just wouldn't happen, and that there's no way for it to be resolved.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing:
aside from not really wanting it to be forged, I don't know how they would ever reveal that except implicitly. If there's like contradictions, and we're supposed to go back and be like, oh, the book was forged. It just seems kind of...
Well, look at Laura Palmer's diary, though. Laura Palmer had 2 diaries. She made a fake diary that she would let people read, and then she hid the real diary, gave it to Harold. So I was trying to think of what if some of this is accurate and somebody forged the rest, and then...
The evil Cooper, Ben, was saying,
change
the history.
There's one theory that, it could be Cooper changing.
Yes, I saw that. Or Wyndham Earl.
Yeah.
Wyndham Earl,
but what would be
I kind of like the idea that Wyndham Earl was posing as Dougie Milford in some of his last meetings. Who said that? I think it was John.
Nice.
That he was posing with Dougie Milford in disguise, which would be his first really, truly effective disguise. But I can totally imagine him sitting there doing it. Somebody had an interpretation about that.
The theory of someone tampering with stuff in the Twin Peaks history could be very logical, only because the historical stuff seems to be accurate. So
yes, right.
So for why change this history of Twin Peaks in certain ways, but then the historical aspects for what Mark Frost wrote are accurate and aren't really changed. It just seems weird. So someone maybe doesn't want people to know about this town, wants to cover some things up.
Right.
Yeah. There's a saying, or there's.
But then again, like I said, I mean, how would that ever be revealed to us? I mean, even the thing that John said was like, well, maybe they would discover it and they'd say, look at these documents, and someone would go, oh no, this is forged. But that doesn't tell us why or give it a purpose. To me, the whole forgery route, it just seems like it basically ruins the book. It makes it kind of pointless.
Yeah, I agree in a way, because I would imagine that TP, when she's on in the season 3, she could be the person. Obviously, she read all this, so in conversation, she could say, "Well, I read in the ledger this."
That's true. Okay.
That's how I was seeing it. And then it would just be brought up in bits in the show. If it were to be this book might not the ledger might not even be brought up in the show. We don't know. But she could
I feel like we'll see it. But they show inside what it looks like.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a cool design, and that would be something I think would be fun to show on the show. Sort of musty old book with the binding and the cobwebs and stuff.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, there were rumors that this was Volume 1 and there'd be a Volume 2. I think there was a website that was promoting this book, and it put Volume 1. And then Mark Frost in that I09 or whatever that website is, basically somebody asked that, basically Mark Frost said, there's going to be another book after the Showtime series. I think he basically said, yes, there's going to be another book.
What it could be the accurate. What if it's not the same book exactly?
But I still don't understand why. What's the
purpose?
How is that? What's the payoff of that? I mean, yes, somebody was misled in a red herring, but
what is the payoff?
With just not even doing that in the first place, it just seems like.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't get behind it. I can't get behind it yet.
Why change Norma's mom's death? What is the payoff on that?
It's funny. I didn't notice that. Everybody else picked up on that, and I totally blew past it. And then later, someone pointed out it says that her mother dies. Her mother's on the show.
Someone had asked Mark Frost on Twitter about Norma's mom. What did he write back? All will be revealed in time.
Postcard stamp is from 3 months later because it's a moon landing, which hadn't happened yet.
Right.
Yeah.
I think John
they were
Thorne
talking a lot about that.
Yeah. John Thorne and Red Room Podcast were talking about
So,
that.
like you say, Joe, what would be the ultimate goal? What would be the payoff of this person doing it? Because it's minor things. It's not big things. I mean, okay, someone's death is big, but in the grand scheme of Twin Peaks, it's not that big.
No, not at all.
Well, here's the best thing.
Here's the other thing. Keep going. Sorry.
All I wanted to say was about these characters. Near the end of the story, Major Briggs says that Major Briggs and Dougie Milford together wrote about the characters in this dossier. So it's interesting to see that they spelled it out that it was not just Major Briggs doing this. It was also Dougie. Yeah. And Dougie already has a history of tampering with things or trying to trying to mess with people and
rewrite history.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the theme of somebody tampering or even not knowing, I love that they brought this into it too. is it the Illuminati or is it the Masons? Or
Illuminati, the all-seeing eye.
Masons.
Right. So it's
Masons.
like, oh yeah, there's going to be a bunch of YouTube videos about this now, and yeah. So I don't have a problem with the idea of those themes. It's just the idea of putting it in a spin-off book that then has to be resolved on the series somehow, and almost certainly won't be just because of Lynch's style. It seems like I can't see. I could see them pulling something like that off on like Lost, where it's a little more like literal, but I can't wrap my head around how there would be a payoff for this book that's not in the book that we have right now in front of us.
Yeah.
Maybe if there's some hidden sort of thing for the list of 7. There's a final line or two of the book reveals somebody's identity in a shocking way. And apparently in the first edition of the book, he hid that last line like behind the book jacket cover.
You're talking about finding something at the end. The audiobook version at the end has some weird gibberish at the very end.
It sounds like it's backwards.
It sounds like it's backwards, so I reversed it so I could hear it forward, but it still it still doesn't sound anything, and I'm trying to figure out is it a foreign language or what? But it's like, why did they put that there? Because if you listen to it, it sounds like it's backwards. John Thornton has a theory that has to do with alternative time. Possibly Annie, when she said write it in the diary to Laura in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, that maybe that altered time. I mean, so he's playing with that. There is a whole thing with time travel a little bit. I mean, it appears that Major Briggs in Twin Peaks, when he goes missing for a couple days, he's wearing a uniform of a pilot, but it's like, it's not in that right time period. So there's this idea that he could have time traveled. Agent Jeffries, where it seemed like he was traveling time, that he was gone for a couple years. Even in the script of Firewalkers, I mean, there's a lot about time, about clocks, and they're messing around with time. I mean, the missing pieces, Cooper and the little man are in the red room, and this whole thing is, are you in the past or are you in the future?
We always said that time doesn't really matter in the red room.
Right.
It doesn't move. It just is.
So I mean, there's a whole, so John Thornton, I think, has this, is still researching it, but he has this theory about, could this be an alternate timeline? But I'm beginning to believe that this was done on purpose. Like, I believe either somebody is purposely. I don't really try to get into politics on this show, but there are politicians who like to rewrite history. They have done wars, and they've messed up our country, and somehow they rewrite it and they try to change what actually happened. And I think politicians on all sides do that. They they create a new narrative. If you remember the time where you're able to go back to actual facts, you realize that's not true at all.
Yeah.
So you do wonder, is somebody purposely altering this information for a purpose or reason? I think this was found. I think this whole box with the dossier was found in an investigation. It was uncovered in some kind of investigation. I want to believe the investigation probably had to do with the Blue Rose cases, which they kind of hinted at, Gordon Cole cases. Yeah. So you wonder if they were doing something and they found this, and maybe somebody wanted them to find it and purposely is trying to rewrite history.
Who do you think that is there?
Suffered some bumps in the old noggin, eh, Phil?
What the hell did he say, Albert? That's Special Agent Dale Cooper. Where in the hell have you been, Jeff?
So the other option is that it's alternate universes, an area where it's valid and it coexists with the other information. And I think I've always kind of suspected the show is somehow going to toy with that idea. But if the book is meant to lead us into that, my issue with that is it doesn't do it enough. Gives us these little things, and maybe that's supposed to be like, oh, we're giving you a hint that these little things are different, and that means that other things can be different too. But put it this way, they seem random. They seem random things together. I'm not sure what it would tell us that Ed met Nadine 15 years later after going to Vietnam versus meeting her in high school.
When did you get married, Ed?
Right out of high school. Norma and I had been together about 4 years, and everybody figured we'd get hitched. That'd be that. I barely knew Nadine to say hello to. And that spring, one bad weekend, Norma ran off with Hank. I was so twisted up inside I couldn't see straight. When I opened my eyes, there was Nadine right in front of me. And there was something so sweet, so helpless about her. We drove all night, Ended up in some little town in Montana out past Great Falls. And I asked her to marry me. Half joking, half drunk, half crazy. It was light before we found the justice of the peace. And Norma, well, she hadn't even slept with Hank. And the look on her face when she found out. Nadine and I, we went up to my dad's old cabin up in Eagle Pass. Honeymoon. I was hoping maybe we'd get around to talking about a divorce, annulment, something. But Nadine was so happy. And you know, by golly, I shot out Nadine's eye on that honeymoon.
It doesn't seem to change fundamentally the characters anyway. If we're going to have alternate universes, I think it's got to be, I shouldn't say change the characters, but like change their lives. It should be the same characters. Yeah. And that would be important to me. I don't want, like for example, if they did something where it's like, oh, Leland didn't kill Laura. But if it's like, oh, he's a good dad and Bob was never a part of him, that changes the character too much.
Right.
You know, so you could have something where it's like there's a different, one decision was made differently that sent them in a different direction, but that core of the character still has to be true. So the stuff that, for one thing, it didn't change their outcomes. It changed the early parts of their lives, not the later parts, for the most part. Like, there were a few things that were out of step with the show, but mostly they were like things that were left out, like, you know, never mentioning Annie, obviously. But to me, if I'm thinking an alternate universe or a forking kind of narrative path, I would think like in version 1, you know, Ed meets Nadine in high school and they go on a hunting trip, and then, you know, he shoots her out, but then something much stranger happens. She like runs away and something else and this and that. And then in the other version, you know, they go on the hunting trip as in high school and he shoots her out, and then we see the outcome that's on the show. But that's not what Frost does here. What he does is he has, you know, version A, where they go on the hunting trip, shoots at her eye, and we see them, you know, go on as it does on the show. And then he has version B, in which he doesn't meet her in high school. He goes off to Vietnam, and he comes back, and then he meets her in the 80s, and he shoots her eye out, and then it ends up with a show. So I guess what I'm saying, that's a convoluted way of saying it. In Frost, this is Frost's version of alternate universes. He's having different beginnings come to the same outcome instead of the same beginning come to different outcomes. I'm not sure that totally makes sense.
No, it does. I think that's interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like almost forgetting.
So, like, what's the point of it then?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, it's a little too, it deviates and then it comes back and dovetails. And I don't, so really for me, I'm kind of stuck with almost wanting it just not to be something more elaborate, like a alternate, at least for the book, for it to be alternate universes or a forgery. So, which I guess a lot of people find unexciting, or like, oh, come on, like we got to come up with a. But for me, it's more like, no, I'd rather this just kind of be press, and you can rationalize most of it.
Yeah.
The Audrey Ben thing, you could twist that around and be like, well, she just wasn't telling him that she was still mad at him.
I actually came here to update you on my trip to Seattle.
Right. Update away.
Okay. The Packards are using Twin Peaks savings and loan to funnel cash to the Ghostwood project, but the bank is keeping a very low profile. It seems they don't want any bad publicity.
Oh, they don't. Well, bad publicity is exactly what they're going to get.
It was really odd where she was going to be a protester and her dad didn't seem to know about it. Whereas in the series, it was clear to me that Ben Horne and Audrey had a conversation about protesting the Ghostwood Estate project.
Right. She was doing it on behalf of Ben, not against him.
Yeah.
I like this version in the book better, to be honest, but it's not what happened. But I would like it more if it had been that. You know, like people have said, oh, it's sort of the Audrey of season 1.
I mean, this book has a lot. I mean, it's interesting. You could just think about it like they're telling history as they remember it. So there's going to be inaccuracies. I mean, I think that's how I rationalize these little mistakes. Because like you say, Joel, what would be the outcome to change the beginning of a story, but the outcome of the story is generally the same?
Yeah, I don't
it doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, this is the first time I've been able to sort of articulate that. I've been I haven't been able to put my finger on what exactly bugged me about it, but that's sort of it. It's like, if this was an alternate universe scenario setup, it should have ended with, like, you know, and then Laura Palmer went off to college. Something like,
right.
or there was no bank explosion, and it's like, that would really make you sit up and be like, whoa, wait, you know, but this is like a little, if it's really an alternate universe, it's a little too coy. It's like, look at these little changes we're making, but don't worry, it's still ending up at the same place.
We got Chet Desmond in this.
They mentioned him, so John Scott was very eager to lord that over John, I noticed.
Foil his theory.
His dream theory. I was also saying to Ben that Lynch, you know, he is editing this show right now. So this show hasn't even have a full shape of what it's going to be. And
is he still editing it?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming he was editing this when this book was being written.
Maybe when the book was written, but I think they have finished.
Shooting it too, I think, for a lot of it.
Right.
So what Frost did is just create this book without Lynch's input, so it sort of like stands on its own.
Yeah, Mark Frost said that it took him a year to write this. So
wow.
The past year.
So I mean, for all we know, we could get to season 3, and this dossier might be mentioned in the first episode and never again, or we don't know.
It'd be a product placement that it was like, to learn more.
Yeah,
read the book.
I don't really think we're going to see any flying saucer stuff on the show.
No,
I don't think it's. I think this is just Frost using Twin Peaks as a jumping off point for something that interests him. Martha Nachemson says, and I could never quite figure out if she was sort of speculating on this from what she'd heard or if she had something more concrete, because footnotes weren't totally clear. It sounded like this was an idea she got from Catherine Coles, but she said that Frost was interested in the idea of UFOs and wanted to make that actually the plot line, and Lynch like nixed it. Like, no, we're not going to do UFOs.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, that would explain an awful lot about this book. It's like, now he can finally do his Twin Peaks UFO story, while still in the end saying, you know, hey, maybe these are extra-dimensional beings. We can't say they're from outer space.
Yeah.
But he gets to play with all the UFO stuff that really they set up on the show, and then they kind of did a little bit of a switch and said, oh, no, we're not going to do UFOs. It's all from the woods, you know?
Yeah, Joel, it's interesting you mentioned about UFOs. You know, something we hadn't really talked about in Firewalk with Me was this whole idea that maybe the spirits were aliens. And in the script, I think Bob Engels, maybe this was his contribution, or maybe it's both Lynch. There was whole talk about the spirits came from another planet, and I think the planet was cream corn. Do you have any background about that?
I remember him talking about that.
Horrible
idea.
Was
that actually in the draft of an actual script?
I thought so.
Or was it just something they talked about?
That's a good question.
Have you seen that script?
John Thorne's talked to me about it. No, I haven't looked at that. No, John's mentioned it. I should check that out. Maybe you're right. Maybe I've just heard it so many times I think
I don't
that it's
know.
in the script.
I mean, I'm not sure if it was ever scripted or if it was just something they discussed before the script stage.
Yeah, maybe I'm thinking of Wrapped in Plastic and the interview with Bob Engels where he talks about that they came from the planet of cream corn, and I was like, no, thank God they didn't go that direction. And stuff. But
Mike stole a can of corn, or Bob stole a can of corn from the planet.
I like them going into the UFO stuff, but I don't like the idea of aliens being the owls. I like that being a mystery in the show. I like the idea of the owls being maybe spirits or the unknown.
Yeah.
It's cool in the book.
I left that ambiguous in the book. You didn't think so?
Oh, in the book, there is the picture of the alien and the owl.
They kind of mushed together.
Yeah, I kind of like that one. That was kind of creepy.
It is creepy, but I don't like the idea of Twin Peaks going down the UFO route.
Extra-dimensional or interdimensional beings is a much more fruitful sort of phenomenon to go with in terms of if they're going to codify Twin Peaks and tie it to anything at all other than just these mysterious images that aren't explained. It makes more sense, I think, to go in that direction than to sort of say they flew from another planet in another solar system and came to ours. That it just doesn't quite click with the themes of Twin Peaks.
I mean, in the book it works because this is a different beast. It's just book. You don't have to read the book to watch the show and all that stuff. But yeah, I like the show being a mystery, and that's where Frost, he's giving us some meat to the bone, to the mystery, and some of this aspects, and it's cool. But But I take it this book as a bonus. You read it, you consume it, but it doesn't follow the narrative of the show all the time. And, there was inconsistencies with the Laura Palmer book, the Dale Cooper book. I mean, these are more in your face, I think. I think these books just stand alone by themselves as just something extra. It'd be interesting to see how this all ties into season 3, if at all.
Right. So, Joel, where do you think this fits in for you? Like, if you were going to rank the Twin Peaks books, I guess you could even include the Access Guide. So, Access Guide, the Cooper book, Laura Palmer, and now this being the 4th book.
Well, it's sort of apples and oranges, you know?
It's true.
Because they're all so different and they serve such different purposes. I think the Laura book's always kind of going to remain the best one in terms of, like, emotional impact. It's the one that's kind of close. I mean, the Cooper tapes are close to a character, but it's sort of tonally all over the place and stuff like that. Like, the Laura one is sort of got the most compelling, like, person that you kind of care about as you're reading it, and it gets you invested in their life. This is a totally different beast where, I don't think, nobody cared about Dougie Milford on the show, and after reading this, you're still not really going to care about him.
Oh, yeah,
You'll be more interested in him and think, oh, that guy actually he was an interesting guy, but you're not really going to be that much more invested in him as a character.
So you're saying that you don't think they should have done a spin-off and had his own TV show?
Yeah.
The Milford Files?
If they'd gone with the first casting that they wanted to do and gotten William S. Burroughs to play Dougie Milford, you'd be able to see this book in a whole different light. I mean, just imagine, totally jump to a side point here. There's one thing that drove me nuts, and I put this on Twitter, talked about it. I can take the inconsistencies with the show, but there's one character who, within the space of several paragraphs, is in, like, 3 different places at once, is 3 different ages at the same time, and it just makes no sense. And I've been trying to figure out why this is. So that character is Robert Jacoby, Lawrence Jacoby's brother. And if you actually follow the chronology set out in the book, sometimes, within a single page, this guy was a 16-year-old 3rd grader in college writing for the Twin Peaks Gazette while living across the state and not going to that town for 5 years.
Wow.
You sort that out. I certainly can't. It makes no sense whatsoever.
I mean, they
say he's born in 1931.
Yeah.
But then they say that Margaret Lanterman was abducted as a 9-year-old in 1947, and then it says he met her in the 3rd grade. So, was he an 18-year-old 3rd grader or a 16-year-old 3rd grader in 1947? Plus, it then says he was 16 or 17 right after World War II and went back to Hawaii before he attended college. There's another contradiction. And then they show the article that he wrote earlier in the book, where it's like he's writing this article about this little girl who was stolen, but then he's telling us he's her classmate. What?
Yeah.
So there was something so off about that character, and Frost is generally pretty careful in the rest of the book. He makes sure Dougie Milford's like in his early 30s in World War II and in his late, in his early 60s in like 1960. So it's like it all adds up, and then you have to throw this character into it where it's totally nonsensical, and it kind of distracted me. So either that character could be some sort of forgery, which again, I don't know what the point of that would be or what the payoff or how it would work.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, how could he make such big mistakes?
Right.
And one thing that occurred to me is he was writing this book and it was supposed to come out earlier than it did. Maybe thought he was wrapping it up in the fall of, was it only a year ago? I can't believe. Now it's at the point now where it's been going on so long, I feel like it's been like 3 or 4 years, even though it's only been 2. So it was only a year ago that Catherine Coulson died. So yeah, he's probably finishing the book up, and maybe he thought, I should write a nice, and it is a very nice, moving tribute to her in the book.
Yeah.
But maybe he did that. He said, I'll have the Jacoby's brother do it. And he forgot that he had, done all this other stuff with the character that wouldn't be compatible with this, Although even then, you still have the stuff about, 17 in World War II and 9 in 1947. So it's still a bit of a hodgepodge. But I thought maybe that could be it. Because the other thing I forgot to mention it says Dougie went back to Twin Peaks and bought the newspaper from Robert, like in the early 70s. I don't think they give a date, but then they show the newspaper that he edited, and it's all these issues in the 70s. And then, so, according to that, Robert Jacoby has died of MS. And then his thing about the Log Lady is written in 1986, and it says he died in 1986. So there's not only are his birth dates contradictory, his death dates are totally contradictory, and we have him writing as the editor of the newspaper more than 10 years after Dougie was publishing things for the newspaper.
Very odd. I have to review that now.
Wow.
I have to look at that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I picked up on that just because I have a weird thing about, like, years. I somehow have a good memory from knowing when people are born and stuff like that. Like, you know, all my cousins, I know what year they were born and all that type of stuff.
That's impressive.
So it's like, that just leapt out to me right away. Like, I'm doing the math like, wait a thing. But I feel like even if that weren't the case, I would have noticed some of the stuff. Just the fact that he's talking about being the Log Lady's classmate and then talking about stuff that happened before that he was like an adult for. And that would have, I think, caught my eye. So can't figure that one out, but I have to always bring it up now.
Joel, do you think you'll read the book again? Will you listen to the audiobook?
I'll definitely listen to the audiobook.
You'll love it. You'll love it, Joel.
I could see myself maybe going back and reading the book after the series airs.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would read it again before that. Like I said, it's a good read, but a dense read, you know? I could see myself picking through certain sections and kind of reading it that way, you know?
Totally.
Looking at different spots that are interesting.
Where do you think this book stands? This is not something you have to read or know to get into season 3, but it does add to the overall story. But because Mark Frost has said he doesn't believe in the word canon, he doesn't like to use that word, he finds this just to be the universe with different ways of telling the story of these people and places. I almost feel like this book is a great addition to the Twin Peaks mythology, but I also don't feel that it's necessary. It's a bonus. I look at this book, I look at all the books as bonuses.
Yeah, it fleshes out the characters more, it fleshes out the town and the mythology. You're right. I think people can enjoy just the series and TV show by itself, but this, if they want more, there's these books. Can I trust any of these people? Can I trust TP, the agent?
Oh, can I say who TP is?
Sure.
Is a female agent. On the audiobook, you hear a female voice.
So the TP stands for Tamara Preston.
It's interesting. Her initials are TP.
Right,
like
Twin Peaks. Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. I wonder if this is going to be, she's going to be part of the agency to help find Cooper or figure out what's going on.
And the fact that they had her footnoting the whole thing.
Yeah.
That suggests she's a character who's going to be on the show because they really thrust her presence into this book.
And it'd be good to the three of us to come back after season 3 at some point and come back and say, how does this book tie in?
How about this? How come you totally changed the idea from the Secret Lives to Secret History? Because it wasn't just a title change. Somebody went back and looked at the press release for the Secret Lives of Twin Peaks, and it explicitly said, this book is going to cover the characters between the show leading up to the new one. Maybe they just got it wrong, but why would they allow them to get something wrong that off if you always planned to do something more like this?
That's what we were. I was telling Ben. I thought the book was supposed to take us between the 2 seasons, and for some reason that was stuck in my head.
His plan. I think.
Maybe he changed his plan. Maybe he had more time and he could change his plan.
That's why there could be 2.
Yes, that's right. So you're right. So maybe the Secret Lives is the volume 2.
Volume 2, maybe.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that was the implication of that comment on IO9. Is like there may be something coming out after the show that would be able to do this or that. I think the parts I enjoyed the most, the letter that Audrey wrote and then the description of what happened at the bank being one. And then secondly, the stuff at the end with Major Briggs saying Cooper was coming over to see him and something's different and all that. Those are now the high watermark in terms of how far we've gone into the chronology of Twin Peaks. There's nothing in any material, including the missing pieces, that takes us further than those details.
That's true.
That's completely new Blaze territory. So we didn't get the Secret Lives of Twin Peaks, but we did get 2 little tidbits that told us things we had kind of already knew or assumed that were were kind of exciting. Gave a little taste of what it's going to feel like to watch the new show, you know?
Yeah.
It's true.
We talked about it so much that it almost feels like, I almost feel like not that big of a deal. Like, oh yeah, we're going to see the characters again. And they're going to be, but I think when it actually happens, there's going to be this eerie feeling of, oh my God, like, this is new. We're moving into like, and it's happening like now. It won't be like, you know, we're finding out what happened and then since. It'll be like, no, here we are now in this moment, moving into the future with them, and it's all unmapped, and that'll be a lot of fun.
So, Joel, what have you been up to? Like, what have you been doing with the dancingimage.blogspot.com?
I've been finally concluding my favorite series. I was doing it off and on for years. I made a list of 100 of my favorite movies about 5 years ago now. And 4 years ago, I started doing short reviews on each one. Just not like, nothing too long. Just usually, here's what these films are about, and here's why I like them, and kind of just writing it off the cuff, like sort of old school blogging style, you know? And I would do it off and on. I'd stop it for a while. I'd come back to it, and had to stop it again this spring. And then it was sort of late summer, and I'm like, I've done 41 out of 100, so I had like 59 entries left. And I just thought, man, I've got to like, you know, it doesn't take that long to do these if I don't watch the movies, if I'm just writing about my memory of them.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to start doing this every day and do it till it's done. So that's what I've been doing. I resumed at 59 in September. Now a month and a half later, I'm up to number 11.
That's awesome.
I just published Citizen Kane tonight. So I've got 10 more to go. I'm probably going to try to write them in a marathon this weekend. And, you know, it's kind of fun doing it that way because it's more like spontaneous, you know. You're just kind of like, okay, what do I think of this movie right now? Go. Did one on Mulholland Drive about a week ago, and there was an earlier one on Firewalk with Me. So I'm just hitting my top 10 tomorrow, starting with It's a Wonderful Life.
Awesome.
Which everybody knows.
Very cool.
And so it'll have some big classics like that, and also some films that are a little more obscure, but are, you know, just as great or even better. That's, you know, why they're up there.
Yeah.
So I encourage people to check those out. Conclude on November 6th.
Wow.
Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome. So cool. And we always say how much we love Journey Through Twin Peaks video essays.
Yes.
I'm always hoping that at someday you will be doing some new ones.
Oh, yeah, I hope to.
Season 3.
Season 3. Well, thank you, Joel, for your time.
All right, thank you guys for having me.
I'm gonna stick his head in the gutter where it belongs. Oh.
Wayne, now knock it off. Knock it off. Remember where you are and why we're here.
I will say I think Mark Frost did an excellent job writing this. I think he's an excellent writer.
Yeah.
I was really fascinated by the history.
A lot of research.
And there's a whole, I think it's the log lady who does the eulogy. And then what a beautiful eulogy. There's these different moments with these characters that are just beautiful. And like there was with Dougie Milford and Major Briggs, they have these conversations about mystery and this deeper, the deeper meaning of life. And I do feel like this is a book to really make you think about. And I know it's only been a few weeks, but I'm constantly going back to and re-looking at.
Yeah, I mean, after listening to the audio, I want to finish the book just to enjoy the photos. And but did you notice the one photo with Leland? And how you could see Bob. But how would you get a photograph of Bob?
Are we looking at this too critical? I mean, like, are we supposed to just look at this more as the enjoyment for fans, or?
If you're looking at this book as it's being presented, it makes no sense. Is it to, like, show us that Bob is leaking out and someone took this photo and captured him? I mean...
I've
thought?
heard people make this argument. I'm going to make the case for why this belongs in there.
Okay. I want to hear it. Because, I mean, to me, it just seems odd.
I'm making a stretch, but I think it's fun to actually be on the other side.
Yeah.
Here's why this belongs in there. Major Briggs was in the woods after the whole Laura Palmer case, and he had a whole conversation with Cooper about the evil that men do.
Yeah.
So he knows that Leland, or that Bob was in Leland. And we do have some representation of Bob, and that was through, I believe, sketches from Sarah Palmer. So there are some actual drawings of him.
Bob.
So I don't know if this looks like more of an image than a drawing, but if I can make that stretch to say that there have been some drawings of him, it's possible for Major Briggs, who is the one that's supposedly putting this all together, for him to actually put that together.
I will go eat on top of what you just said, and it made me think of all these old photographs where people would take photos and you'd see the ghosts or a spirit.
Yes.
So you could even say they took this photo and this is a spirit that's following Leland and to capture him on film like an anomaly.
You know what, Jacoby, he wears those glasses. What are they? Are they red and blue?
Like 3D glasses.
Right. I bet you if I had red and blue glasses, this might look a little different. We are in the Lawrence Jacoby section of the...
Oh, my God. I think
oh, my gosh. We just did. I need to get some glasses.
We need Jacoby glasses in here. Step.
Hello?
Hey, Aaron, it's Ben.
And Bryon.
So we have you on to talk about some of these mysteries that you've discovered in the secret history of Twin Peaks.
Yes.
So it's funny, Bryon and I were recording near the end. I was kind of saying, I need to get Jacoby glasses so that I can see these colors. Like, it looks like there's definitely... And then the very next day on Twitter, you had actually done that. And can you share about how you decided to actually find red and blue colors and put it in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. I finished the book and I thought it was really very interesting. I loved it. I felt like there was a lot of puzzles in it. It just felt like they had to be there. With just the weird way that things were left out or dates were changed, it was very, very strange. It was unsettling, at least, reading it. On page 213, Jacoby, when he's talking about Nadine, he kind of really, even draws it out, with a pencil, his diagram of red and blue glasses, what they do to the brain. Looked at that, and it just, it felt like it could potentially be a big clue. It looks almost like, hey, you should put on some glasses. So he's almost saying that, it'll have an effect. I noticed all the different colored pictures with the reds and the blues and stuff. And I have the movie, the original William Castle movie, 13 Ghosts.
Huh.
And that comes with a red and blue ghost viewer in it. Because the whole thing with that movie is if you watch it with the red lens, I think you can see the ghost. If you put the blue lens up, the ghost disappeared.
Huh.
So, yeah. So I basically got that out and started looking at pictures, and I was really surprised when I looked through and saw that half of the picture would disappear with one lens, and then the other half would disappear with the other lens. I don't necessarily think that's revealing anything because you can see both pictures at the same time, but what I think it's potentially saying is that maybe the colors represent different things either in the Twin Peaks universe or just in this book. So maybe if the red spectrum has to do with logical things and the blue spectrum has to do with intuitive things, maybe if we look at what those icons are that are red or blue in the book, maybe it'll give meaning. It'll give meaning to what they represent. You know what I mean?
Wow.
That's cool. It's funny, though, there's the owl and then there's the face of an alien. And Bryon would say that to me, there's a face of an alien. And I would look at it and it's like, I don't know, my eyes wouldn't adjust. And so I couldn't really see the alien, Aaron, until I saw what you did to it. I think you must have put the blue on. And then I say, oh, there is the face of an alien right there.
Yeah, it's really creepy to see it alone there on the page, right?
Yeah.
The owl completely goes away. It has to be on purpose. You know? And so if that's on purpose, there has to be other things that are puzzles that are on purpose. So that kind of started the whole thing for me.
And then you posted on Twitter about how these books spell out words and sentences. Can you elaborate and go into how you discovered this?
Absolutely, yeah. So for the book house, the special shelf on the book house, I think it's page 237. This whole spread just seemed really odd to me. It just seemed like a really weird thing to put in a dossier or report, and it really screamed with the numbers and the books and linking to different characters, this looks like a puzzle. It just has to be. I've recently been going to some escape rooms in Los Angeles, and I kind of started to see the book as one big escape room. If every page is a puzzle, every page is something that you have to figure out to escape. And a lot of escape rooms, they'll use books like this, and you have to kind of determine what the order means. So when you look on page 237, the archivist says, good literature is a mirror through which we see ourselves more clearly. So I took that as a clue that we got to use a mirror for this puzzle. So if you take that picture of the books and you put it in front of a mirror, what you see is that the numbers above the books, there's a 1, an 8, and an 11. And those numbers don't reverse if you put them in a mirror. All the other numbers do.
Oh.
And as I'm sure you guys have seen, like, there's weird stuff in the book where the letter I for Roman numeral is used instead of a 1 everywhere. And there's a lot of curiosity about why that is, and it feels kind of doctored. But one potential theory I have is that the reason that they're using an I instead of a 1 is that an I reverses perfectly, whereas a 1 doesn't. You know, it'll flip, it'll look backwards.
Yeah.
If it's typed out and not just written like a line. So anyway, so I see that 1, 8, and 11, they don't change when you put them in a mirror. So then I looked at the books that are associated with each one. So it's the Fear and Loathing book, which is 1, the Warren Commission, which is 8, and then Double Indemnity, which is 11. And I just put those 3 books, I wrote them out like on top of each other. And if you take the first word of each one, it spells out Fear the Double, which...
Fear the Double.
Which, you know, it gave me goosebumps if you know, for people who are obviously familiar with the finale of the second season with the doppelganger, the double. It seemed like it was a message to somebody, maybe the person, Agent TP, reading this, like, be aware that there's a double, fear them. Also, remember what happens if Cooper looks in a mirror, he's going to reveal that he's Bob, you know what I mean? Like the finale there. And then also with the I and or the 1 and the 11, if we discount those as really kind of like real numbers because they're written with an I instead of a 1, then the only real number that reverses is the 8, which is Cooper's book, the Warren Commission report. So that just kind of screamed out to me, Fear the Double, Cooper, which I thought, you know, it freaked me out, to be honest.
That's awesome. That is something else. I mean, it's amazing that you put that together. I mean, you're the only one I've seen discover this. I mean, Bryon, you're on Reddit, but I've never seen anybody
nobody, you know, I don't think anybody has discovered this. This is really...
something else.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed that you put this all together.
Yes, that is awesome.
Oh, thanks. The book is so like well put together. It just it demands attention. And with the way Twin Peaks was, you know, ultimately resolved or not resolved, and with the gap, I think we're all hungry for answers.
Oh yeah.
You know, and any sort of indication of what the heck is going on in this report here, and maybe this is all just, you know, is a coincidence, totally possible, but it definitely kind of made my heart stop for a second and made me go dude, wouldn't that be amazing if this was a message that they were trying to give, you know, to decode, because I feel like it just felt weird to see all these books in a row too, and I felt like they have Lucy's book in there, and I feel like they only put her book in there to get it up to 11 so that they could have the 11 flip so we can get that third word, you know. It just felt it felt weird, you know.
And Lucy's not a bookhouse boy. Lucy's not a bookhouse boy, so it is kind of funny to have her book even with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you're doing an escape room, classically what they do there is there's a lot of red herrings everywhere. There'll be something in the room that looks really important, and very detailed, and it has nothing to do with escaping the room. It's just there to confuse you. So a lot of the stuff that I felt was maybe just there to confuse you or kind of camouflage was, you know, saying that Ed read his book 5 times, or oh, Lucy got her book in here because, you know, she paid for them or something like that. It just felt like there's a lot of camouflage around it, to kind of divert from the puzzle. You know what I mean?
Right. So I think Lucy's book was number 4, and it says included because she buys all the books. So that's kind of funny. That was the note there. And just looking at these books, they just seem so chosen. You know what I mean? Not just to match the characters, the name, like Fear and Loathing, and then Double Indemnity, and even I think Charlotte's Web, the last name of the writer, has White. I mean, it just kind of seems like this was very picked out for some, you know. Interesting. So is there anything else you're working on as you're going through the book? Have you discovered anything else, or there's some other things that you haven't worked out yet but still playing around with?
Yeah. I mean, really just before you guys called, you know, obviously a lot of people have been posting about all the inconsistencies in the book, dates not matching up with the series, the fact that Norma's mom is just dead. And she doesn't exist. All of this is very, you know, interesting, and I think it's on purpose. I don't think it's just Mark Frost rewriting because he didn't want to have the actor show up or something like that. What I just found, and I'm going to have to look into it a little more, is it seems that it's Cooper's report on the Andrew Packard case. Where he's the one who writes out on page 191 about Norma's parents being dead and about all this kind of stuff, right? And then also he says, he mentions more stuff about Andrew Packard, and I could be wrong, but I believe he also talks about Andrew Packard being captured, so that kind of dates when this was written. If you look on page 191, allegedly Cooper wrote that her parents died. The archivist has a footnote where it says, "My first question is, why did he write this?" So they're almost like drawing attention to this page. Like, why did he write this? And like, this doesn't make any sense in relation to the timeline of the series. And then they say, it's my only opinion, but it seems possible he did this as an act of friendship, as a way to tell his new friend hard truths about the losses or trouble in their lives without confronting them. I believe he may have left these pages in the bookhouse in the hope that his friends Sheriff Truman and Vidyet Hurley, both bookhouse boys, might come across them. So that kind of like, and this was just before you guys called, and maybe this is already online, it kind of felt like, what if Cooper wrote this purposefully wrong, and he wanted Sheriff Truman and Vidyet Hurley, like they say, to find it for some reason, and to see. The other thing that's weird about it is that the date on the report is March 15th, 1989. That's when the report's dated, and I looked online. The source that I saw online, anyway, said that's way earlier than he would be writing.
Right. Things wouldn't have happened to Andrew, and yeah, it's way earlier in the timeline, isn't correct? And of course, the page right before that is 190 has the postcard, which I know the Red Room podcast, John Thorne has talked about the stamp, how it couldn't have been the moon landing because they had
those stamps hadn't come out yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the whole thing, it's all written from Cooper's perspective, and we all know that Cooper now isn't who we think he is.
True.
So I think there's a couple theories here. There's one that evil Cooper wrote this and dated it wrong for some reason to erase the identity of Annie, who's the sister of Norma, to erase her from the timeline for some reason. I don't know why, because she's nowhere in the book, as you guys I'm sure know.
Yep.
Yeah.
And maybe the other thing I could think of is that maybe Wyndham Earle wrote it. It wasn't Cooper at all. And he was erased from history. Because we know he's typing stuff up in the show. We know he's typing up stuff. He assumes identity. So,
and he's been involved. He's definitely had some relationship with Twin Peaks before even Cooper. I mean, he's definitely been searching for the Black Lodge for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, it kind of like almost like you kind of like breaks your mind a little bit to think like, what would happen if Sheriff Truman and Big Ed found this report with the timeline being what it is? Like, they would look at it and go, none of this makes sense. There's something wrong with Cooper, or like, you know. But, like, you know, I don't know how that fits in, or if Cooper even wrote it. But it's definitely odd. The entire Cooper thing is screamingly weird and off. Yeah.
It is one of these things, this book, I don't know who to trust. I don't know if I can trust Gordon Cole. I don't know if I can trust TP.
Yeah, I know, right?
If Major Briggs.
Mystery.
Yeah, the whole thing is kind of like, who can we trust?
Yeah, but you've been cracking the codes, so that's awesome.
Yeah,
thanks. Yeah,
so impressed with it.
I'm
so
gonna keep at it. But yeah, it's been really cool. Twin Peaks is like a huge influence on me. So, I feel like people who are just discovering it now are both lucky and unlucky. They're lucky because the mystery is going to continue so soon, but they're unlucky because we all had to kind of wait and just kind of think and dream about like where this was going. It kind of like almost made it better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now, you know, it was like all this time to kind of marinate it. And the whole world is, I'm a film that's totally influenced my my work, and it's definitely my favorite piece of art that's been on television ever.
Definitely, so, I agree.
I'm going to keep at it.
Awesome.
Nice.
I think I've shared on the show before that I have a little bit of background in video production, and it was because of Lynch and his work, especially starting with Twin Peaks, that it got me into this field.
Yeah.
So I feel the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lynch's work challenged me in a way that I'd never been challenged before. And I didn't know that you could even go there in a narrative. Like, I didn't even know, you know what I mean? Like, he kind of like was the one who made me see that filmmaking, storytelling could be, instead of just a straight line, it could be like almost like a shared dream or a shared nightmare with this kind of dream logic that you don't see all the facts or necessarily understand them, but you feel them. You know what I mean? It was just so weird. So I'm super excited for the next season, obviously, and I'll keep chewing on this book for as long as possible, trying to crack something.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and coming on the show. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm at Aaron Mento on Twitter. My next feature is called Ugly Sweater Party. You can follow that at Ugly Sweater Party and or Ugly Sweater Film. And I'm on Facebook, Aaron Mento. So I really love all this Twin Peaks. I'd love more discussion, theories, more cracking the stuff. So I hope the conversation keeps going.
Yeah, totally. 1 minute. Tell us more about your film that you've been working on.
Yes. It's a horror comedy called Ugly Sweater Party, and it's this totally insane, weird movie about a Christmas sweater that has been possessed by an evil spirit, and someone wears it to an ugly sweater party out in the woods, much like a Twin Peaks kind of a woods, and the person starts to slowly get possessed by the sweater, which used to be owned by a serial killer.
Ah, nice.
Nice.
I like it. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're going to have a teaser out in the next month or so.
Well, cool. Well, we'll definitely have to retweet it when you put it out there and stuff. I can't wait.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Cool.
I'll totally. I'd love to keep the conversation going with you guys. I'll keep you guys attached to anything that seems interesting.
Yeah, and we'd love to have you back on again. So if you find some other things in the book, it could be a regular segment. You could come in and share other stuff that you found. But thank you, Aaron.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. That would be great.
All right, you can find us on Twin Peaks Unwrapped at gmail.com. We're on Twitter at Twin Peaks Unwrapped. We're on Facebook. Please subscribe and give us that 5-star review on iTunes. And to Mark Frost for giving us this great book.
Awesome.
And we'll be back next week.
If you're listening, Nya Siller Figna.